It's a chili made beat.
Before the tap run dry.
Make sure you mute, but this is Mr. Mark Guerrero, and really grateful you're here, sir. You know, we're going to talk a little bit about your song "I'm Brown," which came out in 1972, and we're looking right now. Hopefully everyone can see my screen. This is the exhibit in Los Angeles's Grammy Museum. Here's the record here. These are the hand-printed lyrics that you wrote out as part of the exhibit. And as you said,
That's the original lyric. That's the original lyric. Yes.
The original lyrics. And as you said, you're there with people like Bob Dylan. I mean, that's incredible. So, and you just performed there about a week or so ago?
Yes. April 13th, we had a panel discussion and performance, a concert, and it was fantastic. It went beautifully. It was a highlight of my whole career. You know, it was
just as long as you don't make a sound. Don't call us, we'll keep in touch. Just as long as you don't say too much. So take a step to the back of your heart. It isn't much, but you know it's a start. Don't you know I'm brown? Can't you see my face? But I'm first a member of the human race. Don't shout, don't you know I found out that you don't know what you're talking about. Lord knows I know how it goes. Everybody's got to stay on his toes. Hey son, pick that off of the ground. Wake up, see what's going down. Don't you know I'm brown? Can't you see my face? But I'm first a member of the human race. Don't cry, never say die. Don't you know that it's only a lie? Don't quit, duck, don't get hit. We're gonna make it bit by bit. Hey boy, get that shine on my shoes. You can't laugh when you're living the blues. Don't you know I'm brown? Can't you see my face? But I'm first a member of the human race.
Okay, I love that song. Especially the piano in the middle. I know you said that was you at the piano in the
Yes,
middle
I
part.
played acoustic guitar, and then I overdubbed the piano, and then I overdubbed one of the two lead guitars.
With the outro at the end, is that
Yeah.
you?
That's me and the other guitar player.
Wow. Okay.
50 years ago, can you believe it? That's why I look 50 years
ago.
That's why I look 50 years younger in the picture.
All right. So first question here, it starts off with what I wanted you to talk to the students about, if you don't mind, is where does this song come from?
Well, I was always proud to be a Chicano. My parents were always very proud, and so that was always there. But at that point, I was just into the Beatles and Dylan and just regular rock and roll, and the Latino part of my culture hadn't really come out in my music at all. But for some reason, there was something in the newspapers. Somebody had suffered a lot of discrimination, and it kind of upset me, and it kind of inspired me to write the song. And I remember writing the song absolutely distinctly, like where I was in my bedroom, and I just remember making the decision to write the song in a stream of consciousness kind of a way, like Bob Dylan. Bob Dylan, when he wrote songs, he didn't think it out and be logical about it, and he would just kind of let the words flow, and it was like an abstract painting. And I hadn't been quite that free before that, but I decided this time to write whatever came out. And I'm telling you, it came out so fast. I probably wrote it down as fast as it came out. Probably took 5-10 minutes at the most.
Wow.
I just wrote down, you're brown, you can hang around just as long as you don't make a sound. Don't call us, we'll keep in touch just as long as you don't say too much. It just came out. And I didn't care if it made logical sense. It was just the feelings. So I wrote it in that fashion. And as a result, it's one of the best songs I've ever written. So it came very fast.
What about the music? Same thing? Or
oh yeah, it comes at the same time with me. I never write the
Wow.
lyrics first. I play, and then I write the words, and it comes together. So the song itself was done in 10-15 minutes, the whole thing, words and music.
Wow. I didn't know that. That's crazy. Would you call this your opus, your greatest?
Well, I would say
Or-
so because I've written more complex songs, more sophisticated songs, but the fact of the message of this song, what it's about, the social and ethnic importance of it, whatever, Chicano pride, because of what it's about, because of the magic of the song itself and the magic of the record. The record came out magically as well, which we can talk about next. But yeah, and the whole thing is like, it was like magically created. It's almost like it was meant to be created, because to write it that fast, and then we recorded it virtually, spontaneously, just as fast. I think everything was one take.
Wow.
Like it was like the song couldn't wait to jump on the tape.
Wow. Are these the band members that are in the song?
Yes.
Do you want to?
Yes. Okay, on the left, that's Rick Rosas. I knew him since the 3rd grade at Humphreys Avenue School in East LA. And on the far right is Ernie Hernandez. He's the drummer. Rick on the left is a bass player. And believe it or not, the three of us were in the 3rd grade orchestra together at Humphreys Avenue School.
Wow.
And Richard played trumpet, Ernie played drums, and I played clarinet. So I knew them since the 3rd grade. So they were truly people I grew up with.
And you, some of my students here that were in art know that we talked about Al Cooper and Like a Rolling Stone and the use
Yes.
of the B3 organ. And I
Yes.
understand right here you mentioned that Anthony Beret.
Yes, right. I'll get into that
Yeah,
too.
sure.
So,
Sure.
so the guy who's not in the picture, Anthony Beret, was just a friend of mine who had a rival band in East LA called the Emeralds. And we became good friends when we were about 15 because we both loved the Beatles, and that linked us. So he came in and played Hammond organ. The other guy, I'm the one there in the middle, front middle. And the one behind me is John Valenzuela. I didn't meet him till probably, I met him in like 65. He was in another rival band, but we didn't start playing together till about 1970. But I was going to say about Rick Rosas on the left, years and years and years later, he wound up being the bass player for Neil Young and Joe Walsh. He made
Wow.
tons of records with them and toured all over the world with Joe Walsh and Neil Young. But he passed away in 2014. The rock and roll life, can get to you.
Well, yeah.
But anyway, those are the guys, and we just went in and we recorded the basic track, all of us playing together. And I think it was one take to it the most, but I think it was one take. Then I went out and put on the piano part, one take, including the solo. And then John and I plugged in our 2 guitars and we did those lead guitar parts in one take as well. It was just amazing. Then I did the vocal and there you have it. It was recorded very quickly.
We got some questions, guys. If you have questions, put them into the chat. I'm going to get to those in a second. Why do you think it's taken on such importance historically now, your song I'm Brown? I mean, given that it's in the LA Grammy Museum, that's pretty important.
Well, basically, when it came out, it was on Capitol Records. The Beatles were on Capitol. The Beach Boys were on Capitol. It was a major label. It was my second single as a solo artist. Even though all these people were playing, I was a solo artist. It just said my name on the record. The company didn't promote it, and there was probably a couple of reasons. Number one, it was too long. In that era, a record had to be about 2 minutes and 30 seconds in order to get airplay, because they need to get the commercials in. And so anything longer than that, you had no chance unless you were Bob Dylan and the Beatles. They broke that mold with Hey Jude and like a Rolling Stone, but they were already major world stars. But as far as any other mortals, it had to be 2:15, 2:30. And this record was almost 5 minutes long. So, it would have been hard for them to get airplay. They also maybe didn't promote it because of the subject matter. They might have thought, well, who's going to care about this in Maine or in Alabama or in Iowa? So maybe they just thought it was regional or they couldn't, whatever. But for whatever reason, it didn't get promoted. So it got released. It got some airplay. It sold some, but it kind of was under the radar. It wasn't until years and years and years later that it started to be mentioned in books, about Chicano rock and East LA rock, and getting noticed, and then somehow it wound up in the Grammy Museum in 2009, the first time they did this exhibit, and then they refurbished revamped it and put it out again this year, and the song was in it again. And so the song has gotten more and more attention. And then thanks to social media, I've made videos of it. It's all over YouTube. Live performances of me doing it are all over YouTube, and studio performances, as well as a video you did with me on I'm Brown. So, and it was in a few film festivals, thanks to you. So it's gotten around, and I hope it continues to get around because.
Real quick, just to clarify, I know your father's considered the father of Chicano music. What is a Chicano? Just so some of the
kids. It's a Mexican American. It's somebody of Mexican descent, born here. Maybe his parents, grandparents, great grandparents were born in Mexico. So that's what a Chicano is. But it's a complicated thing because until 1848, the entire southwestern United States was part of Mexico. So this is our homeland. It's what's kind of funny.
Yeah.
It's not. It's funny. It's ironic.
Yeah.
But that's the definition. So, for example, my parents were born in Arizona. Their parents were born in Mexico. So I'm second generation. My first official album wasn't until 1973. And I'm Brown was on it, and these guys played on all the cuts. I'd done an album before, but it was never released. That was in '69. But my first record out was in 1965 when I was like 15 years old. And that record 50 years later wound up in a major motion picture. So there's something about me and 50 years later. Maybe I'm 50 years ahead of my time, right? Well, like I said, Rick passed away in 2014, but Ernie and I we talk 2-3 times a week. He's just moved up to Eureka, California, but he's one of my closest friends.
Wow.
And we were neighbors. He lived 3 doors down. That's how we started our first band in 1963. He,
This is Ernie here.
yeah,
Okay.
doors down.
Um,
And John performed with me at the Grammy Museum. He played guitar with me 2 weeks ago
wow.
and did a beautiful job. It was great acoustically. Like I said, my parents were always totally into it, you know, and my dad was a famous writer, but songwriter, but mostly in Spanish. So I mean, Spanish was always around, and Mexican music was always around, and Mexican food was always around. And I grew up in East LA, and there was tons of Chicanos around. So I was always immersed in it and proud of it. But it wasn't until I went back to college. I had dropped out. I went 2 years to East Los Angeles College. 6 years later, I went to Cal State Los Angeles and majored in Chicano studies, and I got a degree, BA in Chicano studies. And then once I did all that study, then I started writing all kinds of stuff about Chicano culture after that.
I wanted to point out that I consider you the scribe of Chicano music, because you you document all these different artists over the decades who have made an impact on music history, particularly rock history. And students can go to your website, markguerrero.net or .com, and see all your interviews with different artists. And I was listening to the guy, Little Willie, I think is his name.
Little Willie G.
Yeah, he was really interesting. But anyways, so if the students are interested, or their
Yes.
parents or whatever.
I have the two things. I have my podcast. I've got 41 episodes up, and it's at podbean.com. If you go to my website, you can get to it from there. Right there.
Right here.
See those little icons? There's a Facebook, there's a YouTube. The third one, if you click on that, the green one, takes you right to my podcast. I've interviewed, Trini Lopez,
Okay.
yeah, all these legends, Los Lobos, El Chicano, Chris Montez, all kinds of famous and not so famous, but all great Chicano artists. There's 3 shows that are non-Chicano, and I call that Rock Doc Chronicles. The other one is Chicano Music Chronicles. But these are incredible interviews where I talk to the people about their music, their career, play their music. So I'm very proud of that. And then I've got my new Zoom show, which is called East LA Music Stories. I've done 3, and now I'm interviewing people on Zoom, all about, the history of East LA music, which is legendary. Many hits have come out of it. Many bands have come out of it.
What
And,
high school? I'm sorry.
I went to Garfield High School. in East
Garfield
LA.
High School in East LA, right?
Well, with a dad like that, I could hardly help it. I mean, he was going on tour. He was writing songs at the house. He was, I'd go with him to the studio. So, it just was a natural thing. Plus, I had it in my DNA, so I probably had no choice in the matter. And like I said, when I was 13, we made our first band, and I never stopped from then on. That just kind of happened. It's funny, when our band first started, I refused to sing because I had a little, Mickey Mouse voice at 13. So, 13, 14, 15, I always had other singers. But around 15 into 16, around that age, my voice was mature enough, so I started singing, and just went on from there. Well, okay, we did 2 singles on Capitol Records, but I was a solo artist. They were kind of my backing band. When we moved over to A&M Records, which is Herb Alpert's label, they said, hey, we like the idea of a band rather than just a solo artist. So we became Tango, and we released an album and a single on A&M in 1973, 74. So we were with Capitol 72, A&M 73, 74. Well, just get an instrument, practice a lot, make a band, and just go out and start playing. And everything kind of takes care of itself. Just keep going. Keep playing.
And where do you play now?
I play at Lavender Bistro in La Quinta. It's my home gig. It's 5 nights a week, 8 months a year, and I'm off during the summer. But I do concerts occasionally. I do other things and other gigs, but that's my home gig. I think just playing the different places, the different cities, playing with the different musicians. I played with hundreds of musicians, and there's nothing like getting on stage with a bunch of musicians and doing a show, especially when it's a show. You know, like say that Grammy Museum show, you know, we had to rehearse, figure out what we're going to do. And you have one rehearsal and then the moment comes and you got to execute it. That's very exciting, you know, and I live for that. It's great. Bill Clinton.
Okay, that's right. He gave your dad an award, right?
That's right. It's at the White House. I met tons of really famous musicians, but probably the kids wouldn't know them because they're from my generation. Eric Burdon of the Animals.
Oh,
yeah,
right.
Denny Lane of Moody Blues and Paul McCartney's band. You know, I played with a lot of people that are very famous, Trini Lopez. But
did you not meet Cesar Chavez?
Oh yeah, a couple of times.
Yeah,
most honored about that. Well, like I said, it's in my DNA. I couldn't help it. You know, it came easy to me. I mean, I started playing guitar at 12, and at 14, I played lead guitar on a record. It still sounds pretty impressive. I hear it and I go, wow, I can't believe that for 2 years I was playing that. And it wound up in a movie 50 years later, and they play the whole record in the movie.
What's the name of that song?
Logan Lucky.
Logan Lucky.
Daniel Craig, Katie Holmes, Channing Tatum. Logan Lucky, and they play the whole record in it.
And what's the name of the song that
Get Your Baby.
Oh yeah, Get Your Baby.
I just want the kids to see how.
Oh wow.
Right, that's me with a guitar there.
Right there.
That was the first band.
So you were like 14?
I was about 15 there, maybe.
15? Wow. That crazy.
Yeah, we started really young.
It's off this subject, but I would imagine, you know, Richie Valens played an impact on your life, perhaps.
Well, yeah, everybody in the Vadio, everybody in East LA was very proud and excited when a Mexican-American kid had a national hit record, especially La Bamba, which was in Spanish, and it was a pop hit. So it made a lot of people feel like, well, if he did it, we can do it, you know. So it was very inspiring to a lot of people. I never had, I can't say that. I never had voice lessons. I think I took about 2 or 3 in my 30s, but I never really did anything formal. And I never really took guitar lessons. I think I took 4 guitar lessons in my life in my maybe mid-20s. So it's just a matter of, you know, by ear and learning by doing, learning things off records. Just, you know, the Beatles didn't read music. They weren't trained. Louis Armstrong wasn't trained. You don't have to be. It's probably better if you got talent and you can read, that's great. But the talent's the main thing. Well, the way it came together is funny. As I mentioned, Ernie, the drummer, and Rick, the bass player, we were all in 3rd grade band together. So Ernie lived 3 doors up from me. And one day he came over, I was outside playing hide and go seek or something. And he goes, hey, a friend of mine came over, he's got a guitar and I'm on drums, bring your amp and your guitar. And I reluctantly went, oh, no, all right. You know, I really I'd rather play. But I just took my stuff up there and we started jamming and we just became a band. It just, those 3 guys became the Escorts. Then we added Richard and we were still the Escorts. Then we became Mark and the Escorts. But it just happened that way. And he just said, come over. And we just started playing. And we started doing house parties and started doing dances. And it happened on its own. I didn't even organize it. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Well, if I recorded with him a lot in the 60s as a teenager. My band backed him up on a lot of his records all through the 60s. And I did a few shows with him in the 70s and 80s, but it wasn't until he was in his 80s, around 2000, I started doing shows with him. And the first one was in Paris, France.
That's
And,
on YouTube, I think.
It's on YouTube. Yeah, we went to Paris, and it was me, my dad, a bass player, Lorenzo Martinez, and a drummer. And we did one show in Paris. Can you believe it? They flew us to Paris, put us up in a great hotel. We did one show, and that was it. And we were there for like 4 days, and we were treated like royalty, and we got a standing ovation. I mean, it was just amazing how much they loved us, you know.
Wow.
So that was a real highlight too. So after that, when we started doing shows together, so for about 2 years, we probably did at least maybe a dozen or more shows in different venues in Tucson, LA, out here in Palm Springs. And we had a band. We'd put together like a 7-8 piece band. And I would always get to do a couple of my songs as well. I did some of mine in Paris as well. So we became a group, and we called it Lalo Guerrero with Mark Guerrero and the Second Generation Band. And so I got to play a lot with him, but he was already pretty darn old. We should have done this a lot earlier, but I'm grateful we got to do it though.
Mr. Guerrero, you're such an inspiration and amazing artist. So we are extremely proud to have you once again with our students and motivating them, and really just sharing and being proud of your heritage, which is super important. Sometimes we forget how our kind of background makes us who we are, and that's what makes us special and super important in this world.
I attend Shadow Ridge School, best ADHD.
Before the tap run dry. Don't bat an eye, this is serious. We running out of water. Try and listen when you hearing this. I hope to make an end to this. The future we could reminisce on. Times when life was chess, we made that water upon. And that drought is like the queen because she eating the soul.